Good afternoon. I'm Bill Anderson, and I'm coming live from a very stormy Costa del Sol. It's been bucketing down all night, but we need it because the reservoirs were very low. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Ian Giles. Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Very nice of you to have me on here.
And we are going to be talking, Ian, about all things classic cars. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But you were kind of born with a steering wheel in your hand, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I think that's all I've ever wanted to do all my life is sit behind the wheel. I did my first rally as a youngster in the back of a Cortina GT when I was 12, and I did my first rally as a navigator when I was 16, and my first as a driver when I was 17.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's in the blood.
it certainly is. And it's never stopped, Ian, has it?
No, no, it was my father that set me off on it. He did some rallying in the late 50s, early 60s, and I think that's probably where I got the bug from.
Right, right. So where are you from originally, Ian? But people like to know sort of the backgrounds of people they're listening to.
Yes, of course, rightly so. Well, I was brought up in Newport in Gwent, went to grammar school there, and then my family moved to Weston-super-Mare when I was around 15, I think, and
Right,
that really became home for me. I lived there most of my life until I came to Spain, so I've always considered Somerset home.
right, yeah. Is that the posh part?
Well, Weston-super-Mare is where they used to say is where people went to die, but it was always considered God's waiting room. But it's a lovely place. I liked it. I have a son who still lives there in a little village nearby, and that's very nice. So yeah, it's all good, really.
Yeah. So you decided to get out before the moment came then, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I needed to get away. But we've been here permanently about 20 years now, so I feel well settled here. This is home now.
Right, and you know, you redeem yourself, you know, coming from the Somerset area because your wife isn't from Somerset, is she?
No, she's from Glasgow, sort of nearer your part of the world, I would think, Bill.
Yes.
But I met her down here, so about 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So, yeah, she's Glaswegian, but her home now is here too. So.
Right. Okay. Now, Ian, we're getting a bit of crackling on your microphone. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but you know, when I'm doing a radio show here, when it rains, I get very nervous because all sorts of things happen with the electrics and the internet and various things. So I'm just wondering
Don't I
if it's
know it?
something to do with the
There
rain.
is nothing here that's obvious. I'm in my office where I
Yeah.
do a lot of calls on the screen, and it's all normal here.
Okay. I tell you what we'll try, Ian, just so that we don't. Do you want to try going out and coming back in again? And we'll get Dave to play a song whilst you're doing that, just to see if sometimes that's enough just to clear it up. Okay.
Sure, will do.
Right. Oh, am I hearing myself twice now? No, that's okay. That's okay. Welcome back.
How's that now?
That is much better, Ian. Yeah,
Excellent.
it's probably as they say that the electrics in Spanish houses sometimes don't like the rain very much, do they?
Oh no, no, definitely in our house he doesn't like the rain.
Yeah. So Ian, we're going to be talking about your setting up of the classic car club of Andalucia, but you were telling us how you got out of God's waiting room in Weston Supermare uh, while you were still walking. And why the Costa del Sol? Why did you decide to come down here?
Well, I came on a visit once many years ago to play golf, and I took an instant like to the place. And then a few years later, a friend of mine who knew the area well decided to move out here, and I came out for a week with him just to sort of hold his hand, as it were, and realised how much I liked it.
Right.
And in fact, the very first port of call was at a friend's house who's now my next door neighbour, and it was my first visit here. And I thought, well, yes, I do like this. This is going to suit me very nicely.
Yeah.
He poured the biggest gins and tonics you've ever seen, and that's when I realised that this place was obviously for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to be terribly indiscreet here, Ian, but I'm allowed to do that. You don't really remember very much about your first golfing trip here, do you?
Ah, no, I was afraid you might mention that. Yeah, my very first trip was it? And okay, fair enough. Was straight after a good friend's funeral, and I came out with two of my pals, and we were all only about 30. So to lose a close friend at that age was
Sure.
not good. And we'd had rather an awful lot to drink, and the week progressed in the same vein. We only made it to a golf course twice. Played 8 holes the first time and 9 the second, and then sort of flew out again at the end of the week, none the wiser really. And it wasn't until I came back 4 or 5 years later that it took me a week for it to dawn on me that I had actually been here before. But I did keep saying to my pal, like, do you know, I've not been here before, but there are things about this that look familiar.
Yeah, that
And then eventually I worked it out.
rings a bell, yes. Listen, I'm sure you're not the first golfers to experience that. We see quite a lot of
No, not the last either.
we see quite a lot of golf parties down here, and they're always sort of sitting with a full glass, you know.
Well, I think when you come out here and you come out on your own, your age halves immediately, you know. So we were back to about 16 when we arrived here and behaved equally badly. So,
Right,
but never
yeah,
mind. I realised how much I liked the area. So it was a good grounding for me, a good start, and I still love it here. So
yeah. So, you were saying that from the age of 12, was it, you were getting into motorsports?
that's right. I'd always had a passion for it, and I voracious reader of anything about motorsport, and I would be when all the kids were revising at school. I'd be hiding my motorsport books under my desk and reading those. So yeah, I was keen right from the word go, and I pestered my father to let me go out with them in a rally car. And in Wales in those days, they motor clubs could put on rallies as long as there were no more than 12 cars in them without
Right.
permits or licenses or whatever. So eventually, my mother finally relaxed the rules and allowed me to go with my father and his navigator. And I sat in the back of a Cortina GT. But of course, in those days, there were no safety belts in the back of the cars. So I was sort of slung from one side of the car to the other and lapped it up. I loved every minute of it. And it being Wales, it emptied down with rain that night, a bit familiar to this here.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I do remember the excitement of experiencing my first handbrake turn in anger, and that was it for me. That was it. I didn't want to do anything else after that. Just get me in a rally car as quick as possible.
Yeah. So, but what did you say about by the age of 16 you were navigating?
Yeah, 16, I did my first events as a navigator with mixed success. Navigating was more difficult than I realized,
Right.
but it taught me a lot. And then the minute I was 17, I only had a 10, 12-year-old little Austin A35. That was 1969.
Right.
But I went rallying in it immediately. And my first experience of rallying was is a long story, and I'll try and cut it short. But my best pal was disabled; he was paralysed from the waist down, and couldn't use his fingers very well. So he found it difficult to plot the routes on a map. And we had a single Butler flexi light dangling from the roof on one self-tapping screw, which sort of waved back and forth through the night. And we did the entire night rally. We didn't see another rally car the whole night. We only made it to one time control out of the 30. And that was when we bounced off the side of a Hillman Imp because we went the wrong way down a selective.
Oh my
So
God.
my inauguration was inauspicious to say the least. But I did get better after that. I got the hang of it then.
Yeah, I guess even just on the navigation front, things have changed a lot over the years, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, although I mean that was road rallying in those days, which was rallying on public roads, and it was always done at night, usually on a weekend,
Right.
Saturday night, with permissions, and police approval. But it was all about navigation more than just the driving. So the navigator had a much bigger part to play.
Right.
Nowadays, special stage rallying, the navigator is vital and he reads pace notes, which is very, very important, but he doesn't have the intricacies of navigation that we had. But that's where all the best co-drivers of today come from,
Right.
by using that as their training ground.
Right. Okay. So, I know absolutely nothing about rallying other than I've seen it on the telly. Yeah.
Yes.
And it always looks, it makes Formula One look safe.
It rallying today makes Formula One quite tame.
Really.
Um, Rallying is a number of special stages all put together. Special stages are usually in the UK or in the forest, or they're on tarmac.
Right.
So if you're in the forest, in my day, you weren't allowed to practice a special stage. So every time you start, you're driving that special stage blind. So in
Right.
other words, you've not seen it before. You don't know which way the road goes. You've got an awful lot of power, and it could be at night, it could be in the snow, it could be in the fog, in the rain, and any sort of weather conditions, and you have to tackle them, and you drive flat out.
Right.
It's faster today, but it's much easier. They're allowed to reconnoiter the special stages. They can practice them. They make notes on them so they know to the last degree which way every bend goes. Whereas in my day, you didn't have that. You
Right.
you drove on sight, which made it quite a bit more exciting. And when I was last competing, we had 350 horsepower then. So you can imagine letting that loose in the forest, unleashing that
Yeah.
is pretty spectacular stuff.
But I would imagine as well, Ian, that cars nowadays, from a safety point of view, are much better than they were when you started doing this, no?
Oh, they are. They're much, much stronger, and they're built with safety in mind. They're built to withstand, very high speed accidents, big rolls.
Right.
These cars are pretty safe. In my day, we had integral roll cages, which did a lot, and we had to have proper seats, proper harnesses to hold us in, crash helmets. But it was nothing like as safe as it is now. But they're travelling faster now, so if they do have an accident, then it's going to be at higher speed. So they need
Right.
that protection.
Yeah. Can I
Not
ask?
something we worry about in the Classic Car Club, I must
No,
point
no,
out.
we're going to come to that one, Ian. Can I ask though? This is the kind of questions that people maybe wonder about. Can you make a living as a rally driver?
Only the very, very top level. A very
Right.
small number of them can make a living. For people like me, I had an affiliation with a manufacturer who supported me, an affiliation and sponsorship from an oil company, from a tire company. I had tire service provided for me, but I still had to pay for the majority of it, and it's a ludicrously expensive sport. The businesses I had were all built around motorsport, and I needed
Right.
them to pay for the sport that I was involved with, because I had always planned to make a career out of it. And unfortunately, my career came to a bit of an end with the death of my pal that I was telling you about
All
earlier.
right.
He was killed in one of my cars, not with me driving it, but in one of my cars. And my businesses ran from his mother's home, which sounds odd, but I'd explain it another time.
Yeah.
But we did, and so to keep going was very difficult.
Right.
And the worst thing that I did was stop for 6 months, because once you stop, it's so difficult to find a route back. And what I should have done is kept going.
Right.
But I did a rally the week after his funeral, which I had to organise, and I didn't have a particularly good result, and I wasn't feeling happy. And my co-driver said the right thing. He said, "Look," he said, "you are not only a danger to yourself, you're not concentrating properly. You're a danger to me."
Right.
And he said, "So you really should go away for a few weeks and just
Yeah.
get over it." And a few weeks meant the rest of the season, and I didn't really restart. I did do quite a lot of rallying after that, but not at the same level. and
Right.
not with the same sort of hell bent determination and nothing else matters kind of approach.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the cars. I mean, I know they must have been specially adapted for, very rough surfaces and things like that. And you say the roll bars and things. But I mean, from what I've seen in rallying, I got this idea that the car must just be about hanging together by threads at the end of it. How
Um,
many rallies could one car do without having to be rebuilt?
Well, they are very strong and they're built so well that I mean, I would expect a full season out of a car before having to rebuild it.
Really?
And rebuild doesn't mean reshelling it, or in other words, putting a new body on it. It means a mechanical rebuild. So you would have engine, gearbox out, suspension out, brakes out, all those sort of things would be completely rebuilt. But these body shells will go on for a long time. My rally car from 1979, I sold in about 1981, and that went on for 25 years and
Wow.
won string of national championships. I mean, it had to be rebuilt regularly, but it was
Yeah.
still the same body, same basic makeup of car. So they can go on a long time. Rallying is it's not like mud plugging. It's not You're not bouncing around fields or things. Forest special stages, for example, are very smooth. They're
Okay.
loose surface, which means the cars do a lot of sideways motoring, but they're not as bad as you might think in terms of wear on the cars. And obviously, tarmac stages are very smooth. The only thing that takes a pounding there is engines and brakes and suspension components.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, with a normal road car, you hit one pothole and things start rattling, you know?
That's right. Yeah. Well, these cars are built very strong. The suspension on them will be severely uprated,
Right.
so they'll cope with all that sort of thing. But a pothole can do as much damage to a rally car as a road car,
Okay.
and you don't get much of that. They say the stages are much smoother, so the driving is a bit easier than you would think.
Right. So you were saying that in the early 80s, after the death of your friend
Mm.
in a rally accident, things kind of, you kind of lost the love for it for a while. And
Yeah, I did for a little while. Not very long. I mean, I still stayed passionate, but I moved on a little bit. I did do quite a lot of rallying. I did a little bit of racing as well with historic cars, circuit racing, because I
right,
enjoyed that. And I did some management. I did some guiding of youngsters coming on. So I stayed involved. And then
right,
I went back to fairly serious rallying in about the early to mid 80s, 84, 5, something like that,
right.
and rallied an X Works Rover SD1, which I really enjoyed. And then I kept that going until the late 80s. And after that, it's just fun events. But I still compete today in Spanish historic championship rallying. And I'm
Right.
still winning events in Spain, so that's quite good.
Wow. And what kind of surfaces are you rallying on in Spain generally?
Tarmac,
It's
all
tarmac.
tarmac.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they can close roads in Spain very easily. Whereas when I was rallying, it was so difficult in England, they couldn't close roads. So you had to have private land. So that's why most of the rallying was on forestry commission tracks,
Right.
because
Okay.
they could close those. But Spain, they can close roads very easily. So you rally on the public roads,
Yeah.
which is terrific.
And
Much more
and
fun.
what sort of distances would these rallies be typically?
Spanish events, oh goodness me, they probably last. A lot of them run like a whole weekend, so you might do 2 days and a night, or a day
Okay.
and a night and half a morning maybe. So you probably cover about 500 kilometers, but again, it's split into special stages. So you might do one stage that could be anything from 5 to 50 kilometers, and then you'd have to have a road section to link to the next special stage,
Right.
and there's no timing on public roads. Only where the roads are actually closed then are they timed. So you could maybe do 300 or 400 kilometers of driving, and maybe 100 200 kilometers of timed stages.
Right.
So it all varies, but some of the modern events, or modern historic events can last for a week, 2 weeks. I
Wow.
was involved with the Sahara Rally month before last, which started in Malaga, and then that went to Tarifa, and then crossed the water to Morocco, and went to the Sahara, and that was 12 days non-stop. And then it came back to Spain, went from Tarifa to Jerez, and then Jerez through all sorts of forest tracks and trails to finish back up in Malaga. So that is long and really hard.
Yeah, and for those that have never been to the Sahara, we think of sand dunes, but there's a lot of very just bare, slightly rocky surfaces, aren't there,
Yeah, a
in
lot
the
of it is
Sahara?
just pure mountains,
Yeah,
but there's some amazing tracks and roads on them, and again they can close those, so it's great rallying country.
right. Okay. So, you haven't lost the bug then, Ian, for the rallying.
No, no, I haven't. I say I'm still doing it, but I just do it now for fun. And I have an old Triumph for TR8, which is actually a convertible, which is not de rigueur for rallying at all. But I use that. It's well modified, but
Uh-huh.
it's still only really a road car. But it's capable of winning rallies still, which is fun. And the Spanish love it because it's got a huge V8 engine in it, makes a lot of noise, and sets car alarms off when it fires up. And the
Oh my
Spanish absolutely
goodness.
love it. So I'm well received usually when I go rallying these days.
Yeah, just again, just out of interest, Ian, you're saying that these things are going on for days, or sometimes 2 days and one night for a shorter rally. Um, who is in the car with you? You said that there can be a co-pilot or a
Yeah, you've got to have a co-pilot, a co-driver we call them,
co-driver. Yeah,
or simply in these a navigator, and his job is to keep the timing right, to navigate you along the right route, which is very important, obviously, and then to keep an eye on fuel levels and tire changing and all this sort of thing. So he's like a high-speed office manager.
right,
He's really busy, and he's got a bank of computers in front of him with timing equipment and average speed calculators and trip meters for distance. His job is busy, and he'll have a crash helmet on in the proper special stages. And when he's on the road, he's probably got headphones to link to me so that he can tell me what's going on.
right. Okay. And does you have a co-driver? I was saying co-pilot because the Spanish would talk about
Hey,
copiloto.
that's right. Well, that's what they. Yeah, that's quite right. That's what they call them. They are copilotos. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is this like having a spare driver, or do you actually take turns at driving? How does that work?
No, we don't take turns. The driver does his job and the co-driver does his.
Right,
Um, and the only thing is, if they're very long events, then you might want a co-driver. Might occasionally just do a bit of driving on the link sections on public roads, but normally we use service areas. It's where you brake for fuel and or repairs, whatever. And I learned how to take 10, 20 minute power naps to
right,
keep me going then. So the last international I did, for example, was 5 days,
right,
and there was only one night stop, I think it was. So you grab sleep as you could. So you come into a service area, and whilst they work on the car, I would sleep for 20 minutes and then just fire up and go again.
right. Okay. So you didn't have any sort of tachographs in the car that said, you've been
No,
driving for
good,
too
good
long, you need
thing,
to take a
good
break.
thing too.
So, we're going to come on to classic cars in just a moment, Ian. But
Mm.
you've actually brought with you some of the things you learned and the navigation and GPS stuff into your classic cars, haven't you? Because
Uh, yes. In the preparation of our car club's classic car tours, and now we put on a 1 day event every month without fail, and we put on events sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 days, about 3 or 4 times a year. But they all use the navigation systems that have been developed through rallying. And in fact, they're actually called Tulip Road Books, and they
right,
were designed for the Tulip Rally of the 1950s. So they're navigation without language. It's all diagrammatic. and
Right.
that's used in modern rallying even today. And I use that system. I've incorporated into all the events that I put on for the car club. But all they really need for that is a distance recorder, a reasonably
Right.
accurate distance recorder. They don't need any. Our events are not timed, they're not speed events.
Right.
They're to enjoy the cars, the countryside, the
Yeah.
camaraderie, and the food and the wine later.
So how did you decide? Because there were some classic car things round and about here, and you live very close to me actually here on the coast in the Costa del Sol.
Yes.
How did you decide to set up the classic car Club of Andalucia and not just simply join one of the others that was maybe around?
Well, I started off. I'd been here a few years, and I wanted to do some rallies here, and I did do that. But I wasn't doing very much else. And someone approached me and asked me would I like to take over running a small classic car club that had already been set up here.
Right.
And I yes, I would like that. And in a couple of years, we built it up into quite a successful club. But I don't get on well with committees. I can't run things like that.
Ha ha
And
ha.
so we had a bit of a falling out over things that I wanted to do. And I started off by sacking the entire committee, which didn't go down too well. So 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 what I decided was that the simplest way to deal with this, rather than cause more upheaval with that particular club, was to start my own.
Right. Right.
And I had that sort of waiting in the wings, and that is what started life as the Classic Car Club of Andalusia, which we started 15 years ago.
Right. And I can say this because I don't know any of these people or the club or whatever, but working with committees can be awfully difficult.
Oh, yeah, I can't do it. I think one gets on and does the job, makes decisions, and sometimes you make the wrong decisions, but
Right.
at least you make them, and you continue striving to go forwards,
Yeah,
and that's
sure.
how I've really done things all my life. So I can't really do it any differently.
Yeah.
So I do run this car club. I have help, of course. My wife helps me a lot. Some of the members help me with various things, but generally, yeah, I run it myself, and that way. If people don't like it, of course, they don't have to come along. But we have a very successful club, and I've never heard anyone really say they don't like it.
Yeah.
So we have very successful events, and they're well received.
So, Ian, just but we're going to talk about the cars, but just explain to me what is classed as a classic car and how that differs from, let's just say, a vintage car.
Well, that's an interesting question, Bill, and you can't put a firm answer to it in one sentence. But a vintage car is generally considered something that's pre-war, pre-Second World War.
All right. Okay.
Um, a classic car is not, well, people may argue with the definition, but a classic car is generally thought to be something that's at least 25 years old.
Right.
It has to be in extremely good condition,
Right.
and it has to have some sort of lineage or pedigree. And with that in mind, that is what makes a classic car. But there are also cars called, which we define as modern classics.
Okay.
Um, Now, there's a lot of cars from the 90s, for example, which are only just coming on song as over 25 years old. But 10, 15 years ago, we would allow those cars into our club because they were modern classics, cars that are going to be classic, that have something about them. And a classic example of that are things like early 1990s Mercedes convertibles. Now, they've
Right.
always been considered classic cars, whether they're modern classic or old classic. But because they have something special about them, they will be accepted in most classic car clubs.
Right.
So there's a lot of cars like that. Some of the Jaguar ranges, the XK Jaguars, are of a classic nature. So even if they're not 25 years old, we would accept them in our car club.
Right.
Whereas maybe some other clubs may be a little more purist in their approach. and maybe they won't accept those. But my view is that it's about using your cars, um, bringing out nice cars that are a pleasure to both drive and to be seen,
Right.
and then exploring the countryside, the Spanish countryside, in those cars and enjoying them. And we are blessed in this country that we have thousands and thousands of kilometers of very quiet, hardly used roads all around us, and it's not difficult to put on events every month and use a different bit of road each time.
Right. Okay. And when you're saying that you accept other cars, the modern classics, what is it that defines the classic? Is it something to do with the look of the car or the engine of the car, or is it the aesthetics that you would sort of decide this is a classic, or is it something
No,
else?
it's not aesthetics. It could be if something is naturally beautiful, yeah, that helps to make it that way. But it could be something that was had a design innovation about it. For example, one of the first four-wheel drive cars in mass production was the Audi Quattro.
Right.
Well, that is now 30 years old, I think now, anyway, 35 years old. So that would qualify. But 20 years ago, I would have said, yes, that's a classic car. We'll accept that.
Right.
Um, Cars that were maybe built with a view to being used for competition by manufacturers, for example, would be considered classic cars.
Yeah.
So it's not just aesthetics, but that helps it along the way. But they
Yeah.
have to have something that's interesting and something that maybe marked a turning point in motoring history. And the
Okay.
best example I can think of that is the Audi Quattro, because that was the first really mass-produced four-wheel drive motor car that then was used for international rallying with huge success,
Right.
and sold in huge numbers all over the world. So that is without doubt a classic car.
So, would you think then that when you're saying something that was an innovation in the development of the car, do you see something like, I don't know, the first fully electric car becoming a classic for that reason, or
Um, I don't think that they will, and I fear for the future of the classic car world. Um, there there are young people coming in. What we need is young blood coming into it who have an interest in keeping these cars going. But whether they will get excited about using an electric, say the first electric cars, I can't see it. I can't stand the things personally, but
right?
I really can't see people getting excited with it.
Uh,
So the question is, what will happen to our wonderful world of classic cars in perhaps 20 years time? I
right.
I don't know. The one great thing though is that most of these classic cars are all, well, I say most, all of them are owned by enthusiasts at the moment, and they're cared for. They're looked after, which is why if you own a classic car, the insurance companies look at you, very nicely, and will give you very, very competitive insurance premiums to insure them,
Right.
because they know you'll look after them.
Yeah.
And they also know that you don't do, or one doesn't do big mileages in them. So premiums are very, very cheap. Um, but what will happen in 20 years' time, I'm not sure, because all the people who are looking after these classics now are starting to get old, like me. So I don't know what will happen to my cars even
Yeah.
when I can't use them. My son is an enthusiast, but whether he'll want to keep going with old cars at this moment, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I do fear a little bit for the future of this. But having said that, it's a wonderful world, the world of classic cars, and it encourages amazing friendships and social life, social activities. And I hope that younger people will see that and will want to keep going with them.
Sure.
I would hope that my classic cars, because we're only really custodians of these cars.
Right.
You can say, well, I own that. Well, okay, I do at the moment, but someone else is going to have it probably in a few years.
Yeah.
So someone else will take on that custodianship. And I just hope they'll have the same sort of enthusiasm for all these things that I have.
Right.
So they'll keep this world going. I hope these clubs keep going. I hope my own club, someone will one day take it over. Although it's a bit of a hard act to follow when you've had just one selfish person like me running it all and not telling everybody else how it works.
So would it be rude to ask how many classic cars you have, Ian?
No, no, no. Well, around about 20.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but the trouble is, my wife is always going on at me because I get into trouble because I rescue cars quite often. If I
Ah,
find
right.
something that's in a sorry state, I'll buy it to put it back into a good state again,
Right.
and then hope to keep it.
Uh-huh.
So my collection grows, and then I get told off then because they're all over the place.
Yeah, I can imagine. You must have one hell of a size of a garage, no?
Well, that's the problem. I wish I did. In fact, if there's anyone out there that's got storage space, um, we are always desperate for storage space.
Right.
And it's very difficult to find here. If you can find storage space that's good enough, it's quite expensive.
Right,
So the way
sure.
to do it is to share it. So
Uh-huh.
I would try to find, rather than say find something that would just take 8 or 9 cars for mine, I'd rather find something that takes 20 or 30 and then share it with other car club members, for
Yeah.
example, to redistribute the cost.
Amongst the 20 or so cars that you've got, do you have a favorite?
Uh, well, I suppose I could be really chauvinistic and say it was a bit like women, really, the next one. But my wife can't hear me at the
No,
moment,
she
so I get
can't.
away with that
But
one.
she'll catch up with it on the podcast, Ian.
Yeah, probably I'll be in
I'll make
trouble
sure I'll
later.
boost that bit for her.
I will be in trouble for this one later. But no, I do have favourites. My favourite classic car in the whole world, which I don't own at the moment, is the 60s Lotus Cortina, which I did a lot of rallying with and a lot of racing with. And I would dearly love to own another one of those.
Right.
Otherwise, I like my older Mercedes and my Jaguars. I've got a beautiful red V12 E-Type that actually doesn't go
Oh,
anywhere because I'm scared to park it anywhere. But
right.
these are cars that I sort of treasure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I have to say, when I was young and growing up, I used to have model cars, as most people did, with dinky or whatever. And I
yeah.
think the favorite model car that I had was an E-Type Jaguar.
Yes.
I just thought it
I
was
hope
the
it was red.
I wasn't actually. It was green, sort of racing green, I think. But it just looked. I wasn't. My dad didn't even own a car. He never had a driving license.
Yeah,
But this just looked like
unusual.
the sexiest little. The shape, the design. It was just so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean it's iconic. The E-Type is iconic, and even Enzo Ferrari said of the E-Type, it's the most beautiful car in the world.
Right.
And I think in its 60s incarnation, it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And you see, they're being well looked after and loved now. There's probably more E-Types on the road now than were built
Right.
because they're so well looked after, and people can buy body shells and will actually build them.
Right. Okay.
So that they'll go on and on and on, which is fantastic.
Now, I have to ask you this one. We're talking about classic cars here, Ian. Do you have a Robin Reliant in your collection?
No. Funny you should ask that. No, and actually, I have to say no plans to acquire one either.
No, this is discrimination, isn't it? I mean, come
Oh,
on.
absolutely, wholeheartedly. But but no. In fairness, if someone had one of those, I'd love to see one join our car club because that's got to be classic. If it only because it's of its association with Del Boy and
Del
Only
Boy,
Fools
I
and
know.
Horses.
Listen, I watch. I don't watch these things often, but I watched recently with Jeremy Clarkson. What's it called? The sort of motoring thing.
Oh, the Grand Tour, I think it's
Yeah,
called now.
and
It
and
used to
it,
be called Top Gear.
they did one in a Robin Reliant, and I'm sorry, but it was hilarious. They couldn't keep this thing on three wheels. It kept on doing sort of flips, every
Falling
time they were
over,
turning
falling
a
over.
corner. Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I must look up that episode and watch that one. I'm sure that'll be fun.
And they even had some racing driver drive it, and they said, oh, they were taking bets on whether he was going to be able to keep it upright or not, and he didn't either.
Yeah, that's terrific. They have a lot of fun on that program, I must say. I think
Yeah.
they're quite good guys, the three of them. They are fun.
Dave said that the producer, that Robin Reliant was actually developed as a sidecar.
Yeah, yeah. He could be right. Could be right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, I have a good friend of mine who's just acquired a Harley Davidson with a sidecar.
right, right,
I said, I hope you're going to bring that out on classic car runs. So
right.
we shall see. We've
Well,
got one tomorrow, incidentally, a classic car run,
where
which
where
will.
are you heading to?
Well, we start between San Pedro and Estepona,
Right.
and then it will go up into the hills, up over the top of Gaucin, around the back of Ronda, and then it'll eventually come down to Monda, and we're finishing at Monda Castle,
Oh,
where we're
lovely.
all staying the night and having a sort of Christmas party and dinner and so on there. So that should be it'll be quite a long day out for everybody. So I think we've got about 70 people coming on that
Yeah,
tomorrow.
but it's a beautiful route. I mean, you're heading up towards Garthina is beautiful. Ronda, if people don't know it, because we've got listeners in about 70 countries at the moment. Uh, Ronda is just beautiful. It's really an old Roman city originally, and then you're heading down towards Monda, which is really just in the middle of nowhere, isn't it? There's very little
Yeah,
around there,
yeah.
and the castle has been turned into a rather nice hotel. Great restaurant
Yes,
there, by the way.
yes, that's right. Yes, so we'll be dining there tomorrow night. So that's sort of near Marbella. But so that route will be about 150 kilometers.
Right,
The cars will depart around 11 o'clock. And the way their navigation is laid out for them, it means that they can drive. These are the participants can drive at their own pace.
right.
If they should want to drive really quickly, just enjoy putting their car through its paces, they can do that. Or if they want to drive very slowly, stop three, four times for coffee, take photographs, enjoy the countryside, they can do that as well. And as long as they get to Monda for 5 o'clock, that's all I'm asking of them, so that we can start a party then, which is
Yes.
the other thing the classic club's very good at doing.
Yeah, and the other thing is just daylight, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we well, it's starting to get dark about 6 here, which is not as bad as in some countries. But by quarter past 20 past 6, you're pretty much in nighttime, and
That's right, it's dark then, and we're very lucky in this country that we have that, because we can put on an event now and we know that when we finish it'll still be broad daylight, and
yeah,
that's lovely, and that allows us to continue our runs right through the year. And in fact, our December Christmas run is always something special, but we've as far back as I can remember, we've always had beautiful weather on the day we run in December,
right,
always. So I'm just hoping the forecast is good for tomorrow. So I'm just
okay.
hoping this rain will go away for at least one day and
Yeah.
allow us some sunshine again tomorrow. Chance to get the roofs off cars.
Yeah, and when we chatted earlier, Ian, you were also saying that there's a fantastic network of roads in Spain which makes this kind of event uh, possible.
Absolutely. Again, we've got thousands of kilometres of roads out there. Uh, very small roads, little country roads, but that's the sort of thing we want. But the scenery and the views over the countryside is absolutely magnificent, and we don't need to go very far to find it. I always say that once you can turn inland anywhere off the coast, and once you've done 3 or 4 kilometres, you start to come into real Spain,
Right.
and then you start to get the quality of the roads, and the fact there's very little traffic on them.
Sure.
And then people like us can really enjoy our cars then.
Yeah, I think this is what people maybe don't appreciate if they don't know this part of Spain. You know, I say I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol, and everybody thinks, beaches and hotels and whatever. But actually, you don't need to go very far to get away from that. As you say, exactly into real Spain, because this is a kind of plastic Spain, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have friends who have questioned me why I live here, and one pal said, "Oh, what do you do all day? Do you go to the beach?" So I've never been to the beach. I'm likely to get in my car and go inland and
Yes.
explore and have fun. I love exploring here, so we're very very lucky that we can do all this, and um, all the cars that we have in this club. I always think that the members, what they do, they buy cars that they wanted when they were young and
Aye.
couldn't afford,
Yes.
and I'm the same,
Uh-huh.
and this is why they so enjoy driving them, because they can look back on the days when they were perhaps in their 20s or 30s and couldn't afford these beautiful cars,
Yeah.
and now not only can they afford them, but they can afford to have them in gorgeous condition and
Right.
properly looked after. And then, of course, all they want to do is get out and enjoy them, and this is what I'm trying to encourage.
Is there any one of your members that has a car that makes you feel envious, Ian?
Yes. Several of them, actually,
Right.
several of them. We have got some gorgeous cars in the club. Yeah, some really nice ones. For example, I've got one member, or we've got several members that have a genuine AC Cobra. Now, you probably won't know what that is.
No, I
It's
don't.
a two-seater sports car that was built in America. Well, actually built in England, but using American engines. Anyway, they're very basic and primitive. But an AC Cobra today, if you could buy one, would probably cost £1 million.
Wow.
And we've got a few of those in the car club. So yeah, I'm very envious
You've
of those. I'd love one of those.
that can be like the next wife.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah. I'd have to sell her to get the million to buy one.
Ian, if people are interested, do you have a website that they can look up?
Yes, we do. And it's abbreviated. Forget the W's. I think everyone knows that
Yeah.
now. But it's cccandalucia.com.
Right.
So
So
CCC for Classic
CCC,
Car Club,
yeah.
Andalucia.com.
Right. So if anyone's
And you can,
interested in sort of following that up, and if anybody wants to join the club that's listening down locally, can they contact you via the website?
yeah, yes, or even just put info at cccandalucia.com and that will find me. Or you can even use my own email, which is ian at iangiles.com.
Okay.
So they're all easily available. And I respond to inquiries quite quickly.
Yeah. So you're always looking for new members anyway, yeah?
Yeah, not looking for as in going out soliciting
Right.
members, but we're always happy to have new members. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're still getting them, which is nice.
Excellent. Excellent. So we've got just about a minute to go, Ian. Just very briefly, what is the fascination with classic cars compared to modern cars?
Character. The
Right.
cars have terrific character, and I think I've got to take you back to what I was saying just a moment ago, that people want to buy the cars that they couldn't afford when they were younger,
Right.
and it takes them back to those younger days. But they now know they're safe. They can afford to drive them and
Yeah.
run them and repair them, and that's really. But it's the character of these cars that's
Right.
that's the best, as well as their historic, importance.
Yeah. Ian, can I thank you so much for joining us this afternoon? It's been fascinating for me. I've loved talking to you. And for those who've been listening in, have a fantastic weekend. Ian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Been a
Uh,
pleasure.
and we'll be back next week. Take care, everyone.